Hello, everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero Code. Show where we code a complete game live on stream. Sorry, I'm a little slow this morning. We did a few streams that weren't uploaded to YouTube that were just trying to get my 4Coder configuration into a place where everyone else could use it. Because I want people to be able to code the same way I code on stream. That was kind of always a goal, and it kind of drifted out of that because I kind of had like a hybrid version of 4Coder that was never released, and my custom layer was never released, and so on. And so we're trying to keep that under control now, and I think we've basically got it more or less where it needs to be. I mirrored the editor that I use, like the way that works effectively for most things that matter. And we did it in Ryan Fleury's custom layer, which is maintained on GitHub. So I should be able to just like push those changes back eventually. Well, we already pushed a bunch of changes back, but 4Coder still needs to have a new point release because we worked with Alan to get a few new things in order to support some of the things that I needed. And so that should be coming fairly soon. I don't have a date for it because I don't know what Alan's doing, so I don't actually know when it will be released. Hopefully it'll be released soon. I'll try bugging him about it. But basically we did that work. So today what we're going to do is start editing on the game again, and I'm just going to try and keep track of anything that I notice that's like weird or idiosyncratic with the editing that I think we need to fix, and then I can fix it. And I can just fix it off stream. It's not important, obviously, because it has nothing to do with the game. But I'll just like make a mental note, or I'll keep note of it here. I've actually got a Handmade Hero notebook, so I can just write it down, and I'll remember to take care of it afterwards. So there was already one thing that was broken, and that was that the D key was not doing the right thing. So we had bound the D key to delete range, but instead, and I'll show you what I mean, effectively what happens is if I, actually I should go to the Handmade Hero directory. So if I'm trying to edit, like here in the Handmade Hero code base, and I go to some place, the way I always have my keys work is that the D key deletes from where I am to the end of the line, and if there's nothing left on the line, then it deletes the line feed. So basically, like D, if you tap D once, it deletes to the end of the line. If you tap D twice, it deletes, like it sucks whatever was up on the previous line, on the next line up to the previous line. So the problem is right now, if I hit D, it actually deletes the range. I'm not sure why I bound to that, but you can see like that would delete like all the way to the beginning of the file in this case, because that's where the marker was. So I really don't want that because I hit the D key a lot, and that'll just completely throw me off. So I just need to replace that one function. Other than that, I don't remember us noticing anything weird. So hopefully we'll be fine if we just fix that. So I cut and pasted the code that deletes the current line from the 4Coder source, and effectively what I'm going to do is just see if we can modify it a little bit. So you can see here it gets the view and the buffer. It then looks to see how, like what the actual range of a particular line is, and then it adds one to the end of the line to encompass the carriage return character. It then just goes ahead and, I guess, does a clamp and then replaces the range. So I think all I need to do here is just muck a little bit with this logic here. So the range that it's actually using is, I think, all I would have to do. I don't think there's anything else. So my assumption is that, like, so this range size equals 0 thing, and then it looks to see if it should delete the thing. It looks like it already does some kind of a new line eating here. So I don't really know, but it may be as simple as just saying, hey, let's just take the range and make the beginning of the range be the current cursor position. So I don't really know because I don't know a lot of what 4Coder's conventions are for things, so I couldn't tell you. But I believe if I just say range start equals pause, right? Then what will happen is the end will still be the end of the line. The position here will now be wherever the cursor was, and that's the start. I won't include the new line, right? It'll then just go do its thing where it starts doing some clamping, and it'll look to see whether the size is 0. If we were on the end of the line already, that's exactly the case where I need it to suck up the new line. So in this case, I don't know if this code does the right thing. But rather than write my own and assume that it doesn't, I might just try it because I don't know, and we'll see what happens. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to build this, and I'm going to bind this new Casey delete to end of line. I'm going to bind that to my... so to what the D key was bound to delete range before. I'm just going to go ahead and bind that to mine. So in the bindings file, it's just this delete range. So it's delete Casey delete to end of line now. And so let's just go ahead and build it. So that's an apps forecoder custom forecoder flurry, I think. Yeah. So that will rebuild our forecoder there. And now if I open it, we just have to see, like, does it do anything like what I expect? And I don't know. So the most likely thing of these to work properly is if I hit D here, it should delete to the end of the line. So I don't know if that quite worked. That may have also deleted one extra character. It did. So like if I go, yeah. So it looks like it's pause +1 that we actually needed. Let's try the new line thing as well. I don't know. So let's just fix that one problem first, because that does seem relevant here. So if I just say pause +1, that should be where I actually, I guess, want to delete. So anyway, all right. So I think we've got the first part working just fine. And if I go in here now and I just say, okay, delete, that's good. And then delete again, doesn't do anything. Okay, so we do need to rewrite that other part. So in here, what I think we would want to do is say, all right, if the range start, if it, I don't really know what will happen if we do the pause +1 here when we're at the end of the line, technically. So I'm not quite sure. I would have thought, actually, that this would have done the right thing. So my only question is, it might be this. So it may be that this is like, if range size equals 1 might be the one we actually want. In fact, it might be more like this. So if we assume... So if we assume, actually, I think this is easier than I'm making it out to be. So if we assume that this end range is actually always correct, then I think we can actually just do this. We can just say if range start, or sorry, if pause equals range end. So if we're on the end of the line, right, then we do something special, otherwise we don't. That might be all we actually need. So in other words, here, if we're on the end of the line already, we just push the end out one. This, I guess, always happens. It's not really an else. We want that always. So we just say, you know, range end equals pause +1. And it may be, so if the end of the line is actually technically a new line character, then I guess we would want this, now that I think about it, right? Maybe. Again, I'm just really not sure, because I don't know what the size is here. So I guess we would leave this part the same, because we don't know what this does. I just have no idea what this is supposed to do in forecoder. So I'm not going to try and guess. But anyway, so I think something like that would probably work. We'll find out. So here we are in async tasks again. Oh, let's just go over here. That deletes. That deleted the whole line, though. Hold on a second. Did I miss something here? Oh, yeah. So we do need this to be always equal to pause in that case, right? So it's got to delete the new line. So it's trying to... it probably needs to keep it as pause. It wouldn't advance it by one because it still needs to replace something. So, all right. So hopefully that's good. We'll see. I think that will duplicate the behavior that I'm used to, so it won't catch me by surprise anymore. So, yeah. Yeah, all right. So I think that's all good. And then the other thing we should probably do while we're in here is you'll notice, like, when I hover over something, the color of the parentheses is the same color as, like, the line highlight for some reason. And I don't know if that's going to drive me insane because I can't see that they're there. So I don't know what exactly that comes from, if it comes from anything. I may need to update to the new four-coder flurry that he recently pushed, and we can try that. I'll be doing that after the stream either way. But we may also just be able to hack that, because I don't really care about updating to the new one at the moment. But some of these things are just a little bit nuts. Like, I don't know if I can actually get rid of that one or not. But everything else seems to be good. So we'll see. I mean, maybe I should just bite the bullet and do it. We've come this far. Let's just take a whack at it, I suppose. If I just go ahead and grab the new one, we'll see what transpires. So, let's see here. I'm desperately trying to download this, but of course, like, Google can't really download things anymore. I don't really know what the deal is. Like, Gmail has basically melted down almost completely, and I have no idea why. Like, Gmail and Google Drive are almost completely destroyed at this point. I don't know who maintains these things. Probably because there's not enough advertising in them or something. They just don't work anymore. It's kind of nuts. The number of things I use which are just rapidly degrading, I constantly have, and in this, like, position of having to, like, worry about what I'm going to use for basic services because they degrade so rapidly. It's nuts. I mean, you know, it used to be that I could relatively rely on that Gmail would work, and now it just doesn't anymore. Google Drive is just a complete nightmare. It doesn't work hardly at all. It's just nuts. Anyway, so I'm going to move this over here. While I'm at it, I might as well grab the new remedy. I mean, while we're moving stuff onto this machine. Because there's been a patch for the latest. It's 3.1.1 now. All right. Okay. So, here's our four-coder flurry, and we'll clean up those color issues. And here's our four-coder. Here's our remedy BG. We don't need this anymore. So, remedy BG can just get romped. There you go. And four-coder flurry is a little harder because, well, we have to save our bindings and stuff. Although, actually, it looks like none of this is that way. I don't actually modify any of these files, as far as I know. So I believe that we can just take them all wholesale, because the only thing that I actually need to do is go and include my four-coder Casey file, which obviously isn't included in his. But other than that, I think we should be fine. So let's take a look. Let me close all this stuff out. Okay, I guess I didn't save that. And I'll back it up as well, just to make sure. We'll see. Okay. And then we'll give it a shot. So here's apps forecoder. Here's the forecoder flurry layer that I currently have. My themes file is actually in here, and my bindings file is here. So we're not actually changing any of that. But you know what? I'll just copy the whole thing anyway. I need to push these out to the GitHub, to the Flurry GitHub at some point, so they're backed up better. I'm not sure exactly how bindings files would get backed up, but I don't know. I don't want to know. So all I should have to do here is just overwrite my stuff. And I may have to do some extra work because the theme example file here, that's probably something that I'm going to have to look at now, because even though I'm not using it, it's all the color definitions. So if we go and, we look at this theme example file, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure. These are all new, right? And that's relevant. But I thought there was some stuff like in terms of like dimming the pane that you were on. I thought he mentioned that actually got defined in here somewhere, but it doesn't actually look like it. So that may still be in there, but I can certainly try to figure that part out separately some other time. All right. So if we actually just rebuild, we should get an error. Well, we wouldn't really get an error, but on forecoder load, we'll get an error. So if I open up forecoder, oh my, that doesn't seem good, does it? Okay, I don't know what that was about. So if I rebuild this, it's not gonna include my custom files. So when we actually launch, my special key bindings and stuff wouldn't work. So I need to do one modification to it, which is I need to be able to have the forecoder. I need to make sure that forecoder flurry includes me. That's really it. So in here where it's got all this stuff, I just need like forecoder flurry Casey.cpp. I just need that to be compiled, right? And that's all that should matter. Oh, that's not true. All right. So yeah, that's right. So I will have to do some merges. God, this is okay. So this is actually, once again, we're not going to probably actually get to doing any real work today. Because it looks like, right, I'll have to merge my cursor drawing code with the new cursor drawing code, because I actually put in some slightly different code here. So I'll have to look at the difference between these two and try to merge them reasonably. That's the only thing I'd forgotten that I had to fix, because the way the cursor was drawn was sufficiently different that I was like, I should probably do this myself. So we have Beyond Compare here, and I do recommend this utility. I never remember to import my license, and I don't want to do it on stream, because then everyone can just use my license, I think. So I do actually like this utility. I don't love the new one. It's a little bit webbed up a bit much, but the at least I still use the older one. I use Beyond Compare, I think 2. This is what, 4? Yeah. I use 2, I believe. And I've always used it for stuff. I like it. It's pretty good. So I would still recommend it. I don't know about the most modern one. What I should probably do is copy the old one onto this machine and import my license, because I would rather use the old one than the new one, to be completely honest. That's true of most software. So, okay, going on to W apps backup, I just have to look at the cursor code now. So our cursor code, oops, in here. So our cursor code is on the left, and now we need to open the new one on the right. So here. And I don't know to what extent we'll really have to do much. It depends on how much this was changed in Ryan's stuff. So you can see here, like, these look like they're all pretty easy to import for the most part. This is all stuff that I, basically did. I don't actually want to replace the F4 render cursor symbol thingy necessarily. I would probably rather just insert it, but you know what? I'll let Ryan deal with that because I'm just that charitable. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this and just romp my version over the other version, right? And then I'm just going to go look in here to see if any of this stuff was really changed much. It doesn't really look like it was. So these have to get moved out to color bindings eventually, but it looks like really Ryan hadn't touched this much, from what I can tell. Like it seems fine. So these I don't want. So again, I just want to get rid of those because they were moved up to here. Yeah, so, I mean, I think, for the most part, it looks like ours is just straight up, you can just use it, right? Like, there doesn't seem to be anything, and I should really merge with Ryan's, so we'll get together and handle that separately. I just have been too busy to do it, but it looks like everything else is fine. So really, we just want ours, so we could have just copied it over. I just wanted to make sure, I didn't know if there were any other color things that were happening up here, right? So that should basically be it. So if that is the only thing, then we are now building, but what was the weird purple thing? Like, what's going on there? That must mean that there are color values that are not set up for this thing or something. Wonder if Ryan's around, because I have no idea why that would be the case. It looks like what he did, at least my assumption would be, that, excuse me, that anything that isn't defined in the file is now purple, right? So my assumption is that, I mean, I could be wrong, I often am, but if we look at if the theme example forecoder, if we look at our theme, I wonder if that's just things we haven't set yet is the only problem there. So, like, if we go to my theme file, which is theme Casey, and I try to open that in a new window. I don't know. Let's see here. Oh, no. How do I open a new window? I don't even know. There we go. So if I look at these side by side, and just look at what's in there, it looks more or less like all of this stuff is just the standard stuff. So none of that would have to change. But all of this looks different now. So these are maybe in there, maybe not. Like, I don't actually see... Oh, there it is. Okay. So what we could do is just kind of grab these, rearrange them, and then set any that we want to set differently, right? And maybe that just works, and then we're done. If not, we talk to Ryan and find out, like, where the actual colors are that we're not defining. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this sort of at the end there, so that it's easier for me to read just what the list is. It was just a little hard to find everything. And then I'm going to look at which ones I already had and plop those in there. And then hopefully that'll be it if we're lucky. because then we'll just be able to, you know, say, okay, this is all good. No more issues. Because the editing seems fine. It's just the colors. There's a few color things that make it really hard to use. And so if we can just change some of those colors, hopefully we'll be fine. And really what we should also do at some point, but I'll do it off stream, is add our cursor color stuff in there. So basically, right now, I just hard-coded those two cursor colors. So what we'll do is we'll put those, you know, we'd make a Casey color cursor or something, right? All right, so looking at these, some of them we already had. So type, function, macro, and forecoder command, those we can just replace with our own versions. So I'm going to put those up at the top because those are the ones we knew that we had. Then we've got this, and I don't see, like, cursor mode. That doesn't seem to exist, maybe. At least it doesn't seem like it. So from what I can tell, like, these are not a thing. These are, and they have not been touched, so they're the same. So that would be all of the colors that we can define now. So that seems like it's working, right? And so now, if we're lucky, and we may not be, we should be able to do something about this stuff. So let's see what we can do with some of these highlights. So the token highlight is like way too much, right? And if we look at where that was here, it's this thing. We would want that to be backed down quite a bit. And we already have, like, there's a line highlight in here, I believe. Yes, it's this one, highlight cursor line. And all we would really want for that is to just be, the token should just be like a little bit brighter or something, right? So, you know, maybe just bump it up a little bit. I don't want it to be, like, shocking. Then there's the parens, which already I don't like the fact that they're so dark. I mean, it's just kind of hard to read, in my opinion. So I don't know where I don't know what that's coming from, actually. So that may be, like, brace highlights. Probably not, because it would have to be something that's the same as the line background, right? So what is the line background? The line background was this, FF1, right? And so somehow that's being used or something. Like, I really just don't know where that's coming from, unless it's like that. But that seems nuts if that's the case, right? So it would be nice to know where that was coming from. It might be this, actually. So let's try that. So if I put this nonsense back in, is it just this? It might be. Oh, wait, I don't need to build. I just need to run it. So let's just see if that's what it is. Yeah. So that's what it actually is. Also, what is going on with that? I have no idea what's going on with that. All right, so we've solved one mystery, which is just that it's this back cycle text cycle thing. So I don't really love that very much. I definitely don't want the back cycle, probably. It's hard to say, but I don't think I do. So I think I probably want this to be still the zeros, so it just doesn't draw anything in the background. The text cycle, clearly we do need something, but maybe it's just much more subtle, right? Like, I don't want anything too drastic there. So in terms of just the default text color, which is this, I feel like maybe we can just, if we want to do something subtle, we could, but just nothing particularly onerous like the current version. So, maybe it's just like, I don't know, maybe this just goes up 1 or 2, like this. And then this one goes down 1. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what that'll do. I don't know if I need to use 4 of them or not. We'll find out. And that seems fine, right? It's just like a subtle highlight. Although, again, you can see the braces are highlighting there. That might be a different thing, though. So in terms of the paren highlights, that seems fine. It's not too onerous. It's just a little bit more bright. And that's fine. So the real thing is I don't get this. I don't understand at all that erasure that's happening there. So that one I just have no idea. We'll have to find out what that's coming from. However, we're almost there, I think. I do not understand why these are darker than everything else. I don't think that's normally what I would do, so I must have set that somehow, but I'm not sure where or how that got set. So we still kind of have some more work to do that would be nice. This says braces, semicolons, and stuff. That must be that's the darker version. And again, I don't really know that I want that, so it's really hard for me to say what this should actually be. But probably I don't want it to be that. I could knock it down like 1. Again, just keeping it really subtle. I don't like how bold that it was. But yeah. I also don't know like why operators would need a special thing, but again, they could just use the same thing. Inactive pane overlay, never. That's the one that I guess we needed. So this is the one to stop the dimming. I definitely don't want it to dim at all. File progress bar is the thing up above the top that says for the cursor. I don't know that we care too much about the color of that. Brace highlight, so scopes containing the cursor. So that's that really onerous one, and I don't think we want that. So maybe we would do the same thing we did here, which is just give the brace highlight a slight increase, maybe, right? These are probably subdued enough at the moment. We'll see. Cursor macro, cursor power mode, we don't need to change. Token highlight, we definitely do. And the token highlight... well, we already fixed. All right. Okay, so we're getting closer, I would say. But still not there yet. So... now you can see the braces just highlight a little bit, which is fine. I don't know if I want them to be even more than that or not. Because I don't really see that as being valuable. Like, I don't know when I wouldn't know what scope I was in. And that's certainly not going to tell me. I do feel like the connector lines are maybe a little bit much. So turning those down a little bit would probably also help. And so really my only concern now, I think most of it is just that. It's that weird... I don't know where that's coming from. So that is a bit odd, and I feel like that probably has to be fixed. But other than that, I think we're good. I don't really want the mark displayed here, but we'll take that. So I'm gonna write these down so I can take care of them off stream. But I don't think we need anything else from what I'm seeing here. So no mark annotation. Why do tokens disappear? So there's something weird going on there, but I'm not sure what. And then like I guess I can take care of the less bright scopes right now. I would also prefer it if this thing went away. So like the no active pane border would be nice. I don't care for that either. So I think we're good. And, you know, even that I probably could live with for a few hours anyway. So I don't know that we care too much about that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the couple of remaining low-hanging fruit things, which is just get rid of those scope lines being so bright. And then maybe we're good. I also might turn down the roundness on the cursor. So there's quite a bit of roundness happening. This, and I don't really like rounded things, just in general. So we'll have to figure out how to make that happen. I'll write that down as well. Roundness parameter. And we'll go from there. Okay, and I think that's all good. So, reasonably, oops. I don't know what happened there. Reasonably happy with all of that. And again, like I said, I think the only thing we really need here maybe is like these annotations are just too much. So maybe if we just turn them down to like, you know, I don't know if we need to be a quarter of the brightness, but like maybe more like that in terms of alpha. See if that's more tolerable. Yeah, so that wouldn't really get in my way. Yeah. So I think that's all good. And I'm also going to make a note that the cursor interpolation stuff seems kind of broken a little bit. So I might look into that as well. Like, there's just too many cursor interpolation artifacts. Okay. And we'll take one last gander. I guess I'll rebuild this as well so we can get the roundness removed. Oh. Whoops. Looks like I missed one. Did I? Yes, I did. All right. Okay. So now we're back to non-rounded cursors, which is much more comfortable for me. I also think the thickness is maybe a bit much. Looks like I didn't do that though. Maybe the thickness isn't getting piped through. So it looks like it's only on those little guys, and the main one is like bigger or something. I don't know where that's coming from. All right, well, we'll take a look. Thickness of cursor? Question mark? So I'll have my stuff for afterwards. So I think that's it. I don't think we can fix the text. I mean, maybe we can if we just guessed right, but since I have no idea what of this would be involved in making the token disappear like that, I really don't have any idea where I would look, right? Like just looking token highlight. I'm not sure there's really much else to this. I mean, it could have something to do with this, I guess, but that wouldn't disappear, right? That would show up. So I mean, I just don't see. So I don't know where that's coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and just, I'll talk to Ryan about that and we'll go from there. So let's try doing, just to see what happens if we edit, because we may discover some things along the way. I don't know. So if we go ahead and build, like, right, and just see if we can jump to errors and stuff like that, because I don't know if we can. Of course, we don't have any errors at the moment, but we'll go make some. And it seems pretty good. I would say it, for whatever reason, it seems a bit dim. I'm wondering, does this monitor a bit dim? Because I think they're the same colors. No, that's as bright as it gets. Maybe I'll turn the contrast up a little. I don't know. Maybe that was a bad idea. We'll see. It seems a bit dim to me. It may actually be also like the font is not the font I'm used to. So we might have to go like set the font to something else. That may be part of the reason why it feels a little bit off. So yeah, I don't know. That'll be a weird one too. It's weird we can kind of see these sort of things. You're like, oh, that's a little bit, seems a little bit wrong. All right. Other than the dimness, which seems a little bit annoying, like the dimness definitely kind of bugs me. I don't know why it feels so dim, but it definitely feels really dim. I don't know if it feels dim to you out there at home, but it definitely feels dim to me, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. Hard to say. All right, so yeah, we can compile just fine. Let's see what actually happens if we try to make some edits here. So we go in and let's suppose that we're going to go into the entity system and do some stuff. So one of the next things that I might do, for example, is I had kind of thought to myself, well, I might want to go in and start removing the idea of entity pieces. Because one of the problems that I have right now is that there's just kind of too much cruft involved in how these entities work. So I don't really know if entity pieces should exist or not, but they're kind of a little bit broken at the moment. And a lot of this depends on what we want to do with the tag matching long term as well, because what I'd like to do now is I'd like to be able to get to the point now where it's pretty easy to like move stuff around in the game in terms of like what art goes with what things. And right now that's definitely too weird, right? There's just too much involved in it. And so what I'd like to do somehow is sort of rework that system a little bit and just basically cut down on the complexity. Because at this point, you know, we know exactly what the art that comes in, you know, how it's working exactly. So we should be able to do something here where we can make it easier to set things up, right? And so that's the main thing that I kind of wanted to do next anyway. I think we'll just kind of leave lighting for a little bit and we'll come back to it later on. But anyway, so it's one of those things where we would definitely like to be able to streamline and simplify this process. And you can see that it has this like tag system here for like going and finding what it's actually matching. And if we look into the sources directory, we've got like the tags files here. So we've got like basegame.hht, right? And you can see that these things have, you know, this is a particular PNG file and it's a head, right? And it's got, you know, these tags on it or whatever. And I guess the thing about it is just that, like, I feel like this was too much work for us, right? It just doesn't it just doesn't really help us very much. It would be easier if we just said, "Hey, this is the identifier for this head," and then we pick, in the game. And so simplifying the tag system down to something where we literally just ask for one thing, and then you just have a parameter that picks out of there, because that's all you can really do with the art files anyway. Like, when we load these things in, if we go look at like one of these, right? This is what the orphan head files look like, right? They're just laid out in a particular fashion. So we know that they can only have just that one, whatever it is that they've got. And so we don't really need any kind of elaborate tagging anymore. We can just use some kind of a direct lookup, which would be way more efficient and much easier to specify, right? And we would lose the ability for the art to be flexible with respect to the code, certainly. So, yeah, I mean, it's not that there aren't some drawbacks in sort of a broader scheme, but just in terms of this stuff, we could just make it a lot easier than what we did, right? And so we still kind of need the complexity of this stuff, sadly, because there's no way, like, one of the real bummers about the way things work if you do kind of just PNGs as your source assets, right, is there's no markup ability in them, right? There's no way to say, like, where the snap points are and that kind of stuff. It's a very, like, this is just an unavoidable consequence of the fact that 2D image creation software has not evolved since we started doing games. And so you can't, like, do the kind of complex stuff you do with, like, 3D files where you say, like, this is an attach point and it snaps to here and all that stuff. So we still need to be able to do that stuff. But what I was saying is that, in here we can certainly just try making these things more explicit so that we apply this stuff in code rather than exporting it out to the art side of things, right? Meaning we don't try to have there be this elaborate binding stuff, because it just takes time. It just takes runtime, and it doesn't really get us anything because we always are setting the tags to try and pick a specific thing anyway, right? So, again, I don't really know whether we want to keep the pieces part or not, but I guess the first step here would just be to, like, stop doing the tags this way, right? And instead you would just say, look, for each of those pieces, so for each of the entity piece, this thing here, this would actually be the thing that tells you what the piece is, like which one you're getting. And so you just need an asset file, and then, like, you would need to set up a lookup code for it. And the problem is that the lookup codes are actually the things that would be specific to the file. So, like, a head file is going to have a specific indexing scheme. And so really, I think that's the thing that this would need to say. So it would need to say what kind of art piece it was, and then it would need to say what indexing scheme it needs, right? And then it would just use that indexing scheme. I think that is more or less the entirety of it, right? Like, I don't think we would need anything else. So if we go into the asset system as it is now, and we just look at, like, the tag stuff, I would think that we can just sort of not do that anymore. And you could almost tell that you kind of knew that was true already, in a sense, because we had previously when we made the import, right, we actually had these, like, tag matrices that we build, right? And then we apply those tag matrices to, like it's this import grid stuff, right? We apply the tag matrices on top of the asset files, but we know for a fact that they always have to be that set of tags because that's how we're applying them in the first place. So if we just saved these sets of tag matrices, if we just thought of those as hard-coded things that were in the game, right? And then all you were doing when you marked up one of these asset files is said, well, it's, it uses this particular tag matrix, then we don't really need the concept of tags anymore because you now know it is this particular 2D matrix is how the lookups work, right? And so that's really just like a massive simplification that we can do there. And again, we can't simplify it all the way down to the thing that we started with, which is that the file name itself tells you everything you need to know. Unfortunately, that just is never going to happen. And like I said, that's because we need these alignment points in here. We need the ability to save these out from the game like we do currently, because we need to be able to adjust how these pieces snap together. So the only thing we can fix is the part where, you're picking these things out by using sort of a diffuse set of tags. I think that was just a little bit too much. It also, and again, just to tie it back to how things were working in the actual entity system, is that if you look at these visible pieces, you wanted each visible piece to actually have its own tag set in the old system, and that was kind of not clear how that would work, right? And so what we really want to be able to do is just replace this. So instead of just the flags, it also would then have a thing which said, this is the piece that I am, in some, big set of identifiers for pieces, right? And then we can just use those, we just have sort of a standard enum set that just says, here's all of the different stuff that we have. And I think that's probably just better. I mean, because again, we still can leverage the fact that these files have multiple things in them to avoid having to have too many enums. So when we look at something like this, we don't have to define enums for each of these. We just need an enum basically per file. So you can say what's this thing? Oh, it's fire particles. And then there's just a big thing of fire particles in here, right? And that's all we really needed to know. So I think that's what I would like to do next, and that way we can just start to decorate the game more, which I think would be nice. And we can put each of the different orphans in there correctly, because we have all the different orphan bodies and orphan heads and stuff like that. So I think that's probably the best idea for now, right? And so I think that's what I would like to do next. And looking at some of this stuff, so blocks are fine. Oh, it's Krampus. And yeah, so I think that'll just work. That's my theory anyway. All right. So effectively what this would look like is that when we build one of these asset files, when we load, I guess I should say, these asset files, what we would do when we merge the asset files together is we'd try to just figure out of all of the tags, of all of the, I guess not tags, but of all of the things we have, and we could call those tags, I guess, if we want to, we would just need to figure out each of those would map into a table where the table just said what the file, an ID that corresponds to that file. And we would already know in the code which kind it was. So if it was a head, if it was a particle, et cetera, et cetera. So there'd just be something, and I guess we don't have a tags section here or whatever, but we have a thing that has the file format information in it. So these, right? They've got all of this stuff, right? And you can see just why I think this kind of system didn't really work out that well. It's just because you end up defining so many things anyway that you should have just used specifics and let the code handle it. It's one of those things where you are inserting too much slop, and the idea is that somehow that slop will become useful, but it never does, right? You never actually end up having sort of any of the play in the joints that you thought was going to be really useful to you somehow never actually ends up becoming that, right? So if we look, we know that some of this stuff, right, like head, body, that sort of stuff, block, these are basically the things that tell us how to index into the files. So the basic category, I think, would more or less survive unchanged. And we should probably go through and like cut out some of the old unused stuff now, and just, condense it down. But it's the tags really that is the thing that then we would change. And we might, maybe what we should do is actually keep the tags file, just keep the tag ID as the thing. And then we just change tags to meaning specifically which one of these things you're talking about, right? So when we look at those files, all we're really doing is mapping this stuff to the files, right? And maybe that's how we do it. So if we look in the base game HT file, what I'm basically talking about here is for each of these, when we do tags, right? Instead now we would just call this like forest 01, right? Or just forest, right? Because if you look at what's in block forest 01, so let's take a look, right? It's just a block. And so if we wanted to have variants of this block, we could have them stack up. But, all we really want to say is, look, when we're doing forest stuff, that the tag for this is like, I don't know, forest block, right? And there wouldn't be multiple tags, really. I guess, one could argue that you need multiple tags to like put things into more than one place if for some reason you've got a single asset file that you want duplicated into two places, but I don't know why we would ever do that. So it's probably just like tag, right? And so if we were to look at what this would be, so we got block orphanage here, so we would do orphanage block, right? And because we have sort of a different conception of what this would be, if we may want multiple tiles of this, right? So this is like just orphanage wall probably, right? And this is like forest floor. You know what I mean? We could also adopt some of those theme like forest basic and orphanage basic or something like that. I don't know what we want to call those, right? But it would be something like this. And we've got block orphanage 02, apparently, and 03. Why is this? There we go. Okay, so there is floor. There's stone floor. Okay. So now I was right the first time. I thought maybe there wasn't there. So yeah, so this is orphanage basic wall. This is forest floor. Let's do it this way. That's not how you spell orphanage. And this is orphanage floor wood. And this is orphanage floor stone. And these would just get parsed and they'd just get slotted directly in there, right? And then from then on, we don't need to do any tag matching anymore. You just use a specific enum that goes directly with this. Now, normally the underscores here is not how we do enums, so, it might be more like this. right? And off we go. So I think that's more or less what I would want. And I guess when you think about it, when we do a game build, yeah, we would just hard code those into an enum list and they would parse out of here and that would just be the end of it, right? So then if you imagine those were in here, right? If you imagine that now what we had was actually just the list of the things. So we just had like this stuff in here, right? So that's a pretty weird thing I'm going to have to take a look at too. For some reason, moving one token goes past the semicolon, but the semicolon is a separate token. So I'm going to have to look at that. Token move skips over semicolons. The good news is we haven't noticed much else. So I think our editing situation is seeming pretty reasonable, right? Yeah. So if we imagine these just got lined up like this, that seems pretty good. I don't know. I'm down with that. So these would just be named by the people, I guess. Although I guess these are the body types, so I'm not sure how we want to name the body types exactly. It looks like the bodies are basically named, you know, by their properties. So, like, these are just orphan, body, earth. I guess we could also try this sort of thing. So, we could also do, like, wall, orphanage, just so it's a little clearer. Floor, floor. I don't know. That might be a little better, just for our own ease of use, so we can see what's what more quickly. Might want to get rid of the cursor trails as well. They're just too much. So there's a battery saver mode. Actually, we can already kind of do that. That I think, yeah, gets rid of them. It's much nicer without them. I think actually they're just too noisy for me. Yeah. All right, so looking at the orphan bodies here, these would just be pretty straightforward. I'm not sure if we had really much plans for what these meant, but yeah, sorry, it's a little slow for me today. Like, some of those little idiosyncrasies, like the fact that it skips over a semicolon for some reason, make it hard for me to edit fast because it edits differently than what I'm used to. So I'm not sure how to really fix that part. You know, like, I guess that's just the code for that. What determines a token in that setting is somehow different. And so it's just a little bit tough. All right. So this is, again, something where it's just kind of really annoying because this stuff is really not stuff you should ever have to do. It's just because C++ is such a gigantic pile of crap that you ever have to do anything like this. You know, this is what computers were supposed to be made for, but they're too busy worrying about, like, ridiculous crap in the spec about things that literally have no bearing on programming at all. But, you know, they can't be bothered to actually get something that makes it automatic for you to have things like enums that are also strings. It's insane. Never let anyone tell you can't program, kids. Just go look at the C++ committee if you ever think you're not good enough to be a programmer. There is no bar too low. Ooh, that's a spelling error. Opron. There you go. So that's all of the orphan bodies. And, you know, I don't know, but maybe walls and floors get separated in here, if you imagine, right? And I assume we want this to just be tag, right? And eventually these will all have alignment info stuck in there. Because, you know, we have to go into the little editor in the game at some point for each of these and actually, like, place where those attachment points are. So all of these will eventually look like this one, you know, because it will have had the alignment data generated by the game editor. But at the moment, since we don't have that, all of these are basically all they have is just the tag in them. All right. So this is still a body, I guess, right? This is cat body Fred. Cat body Hannah. And cat body... Oh, wait. That's not cat body. Where's Molly? Oh, there's Molly. Somehow Krampus got inserted in between there. I guess because we're going in alphabetical order. But let's keep the cats together, right? So we've got Molly, who you just saw on stream earlier, right? So we've got the cat bodies, and then we've got just Krampus. I guess these are actually all in one file, though? So don't they have heads and bodies? So I guess for some reason these are all together, but I don't actually know why. Like, why are they not... I don't know why these wouldn't be in the same file. So that to me seems like it should probably just get fixed. Because there's no real reason not to do that. Like, I mean, they are still just heads and bodies, right? So, I mean, why would we not just have them... I don't get it. Like, I don't know why we did that, unless there was some confusion as to how these should be created. I feel like we should just fix that. So I might just say, like, you know, these should probably just be more like this. I mean, yet another way to say it was since there's heads as well as bodies, and the type tells you the difference between those two, maybe you don't even need that. Like, maybe it's just this. Right? I'm starting to have a thought. I just had a thought that maybe I can get exactly what I want without actually even changing this. So riddle me this, Tagman. If we just said, look, we're going to keep most of this stuff, but just flatten a few of these tags. What if we just had a basically you hash the tag into a match, which you just look up in a table. So for example, this is basically already what we want. It's just Orphan Hero, Orphan Earth. Like if you read it, not as two tags that are used in fuzzy matching, but as in specific. So I just have to match these tags directly. I mean, who cares if I put an underscore between them or not? I can make the code already do what I need it to do, right? And so if you just clean up a few of these and you say like, oh, this is, you know, Cat Fred and Cat Hannah and Cat Molly probably instead of, you know, what was here before or something. It's still basically the same thing. So I feel like if we just collapse a few of these, we might actually be fine. So let's try that, because that's actually pretty compelling, right? So if we just left everything exactly the way it was, and then we just changed the lookup system, so instead of there being, so, you know, when we load it, right, you can see what happens during the asset actual loading process. When we actually go through here and load these things in, we load in all the different, like, we load in all the different tags and we load in all the different assets and all that stuff, right? And once we do that, we just have tag lists. And when we go to do the matching, we have to literally go through, like, each of those things. So if you look, there's like one of these, where is it here? It's like first asset of type, right? So you go look at the category you're talking about. If you say that this thing's supposed to be a head file, it goes in here and it starts looking for all of the head assets or crap like that, right? And I think what we actually want to do here is just say, look, instead of that, just have all the tags that aren't directional tags, that aren't picking from the matrix thing. Have all those tags actually just be things that you hash into a hash, and you don't care about the type anymore other than just as something that's part of that hash matching, right? So there's something like this, like asset match. I don't know what we want to call this. Asset I don't really know what this would be called exactly. We'll think about that in a second. But effectively what we get here is a hash of the tags that are involved. And when we check the hash, we would just check against the hash value first. So there's something in here like a hash, a tag hash. And then in here is whatever the asset number actually is. So the asset index as it is currently loaded. Maybe that. Oh no. Is my completion not turned on? Ah, so completion is not in. Hold on a second. We're gonna have to fix that. I live and die by completion. So the completion is not is erroneously only in the command version. So if you take a look at where completion actually is happening here, word complete, you can see that it only happens in the command version. That's not acceptable, right? That's got to be up here. All right, let's just go ahead and reload that. What buffers have I modified? I don't even know what buffers I've modified. Asset hash entry next. So we'll get back to you in a moment. It all looks good there. We can also at the moment turn off extra compilation to save time. So like lightprof and sphere and such don't actually need to run, right? We can just jump right to the actual game and compile it. So I think that's what we probably can do here with this system. So it's not actually as far off as I was imagining it was. So we probably can just do something much simpler. Oops, that was power mode. I didn't mean to do that. I want battery mode. There we go. Okay. So in theory, completion should be working now. Is it? Let's see. Yes. So let's go ahead and look at the asset hash entry. So if we just imagine that we've got our assets hashed and we have like the asset index in the table here. On load, we can put all of these things into one of these hash tables, so we can basically have a like tag hash here where we just look up things by the tags directly. And that way, when you ask for one of these things, you can just ask for it by the hash. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can look at this, and my assumption is that actually what we can do is not have to use a real hash anyway, because presumably we would probably only have something like, less than 1,000 tags anyway, even in the final game. So what we could probably do is just pack the bits in. So we'll say, you've got 64 bits of hash. And since you've got 64 bits of hash, we know that if you want to have, say, 10 bits of tag data, you can fit 6 tags into a single 64-bit ID. So the hash, rather than thinking of it as a hash, it's actually more like it just is the tags, right? So you wouldn't have to secondarily match or worry about hash collisions, because it's really not a hash per se. It's more like just actually the thing, right? It's actually the data in a sense. So in here we could have our tag hash, right? And we can have something, I don't know how many of these we want to have. It doesn't really matter for now, because we can look at the performance of that at some other time. But if you imagine we would just have these hash entries in here, and then what we would do is just stick in the various pieces, All we would then need is something that allows us to do a tag hash on, say, like 4 tags. Let's say 4 tags total, or something like that. And in fact, if we assumed that each tag, like I said, was like 10 bits or something, and we assumed no more than 3 tags, we could even use 32 bits. There's no real reason. We don't care. So 64 is probably fine. So I'm going to go ahead and just assume that that's what we would be doing. And we would have something like, okay, get tag hash or something like this. And in here, we would pass those tags that we were getting from the HHT file format stuff. So in here, where we've got these file formats with the different tags and so on. So these tags for whatever is happening here, these tags would be like fused together. So when we go to produce the actual composite of these, we would just say, yeah, each one of these gets converted to, a U64. And they just get OR'd together. And we just shift them up. So, like, the first one doesn't get shifted up at all. Like, the second one gets shifted up 10 or whatever, right? The next one gets shifted up 20. And the final one gets shifted up 30, right? And so it's nothing special. It's just pretty much what you would expect. But that's how you do... Is this... Oh, so this is backwards also. We have one more thing in our bindings here. Apps, four-quarter bindings. The mapping for home is broken. So it's actually the opposite of what it's supposed to be. So this and this are flipped. Let's try that again. So if I exit out of here and load back up, there's probably a key to like reload the bindings or something, but I don't know what it is. So okay, much better. So if we assume that we have this way of generating a tag hash, then yeah, like all we need is just to remember that for any piece that we might have. And like I said, it would be compelling to force these things to always fit into a U32 just for compactness sake. So I'm sort of tempted to say we should just say that you only get 3 of them. Because I think 8 bits is too small. Like, we definitely want more than 8 bits. But I don't know. Even 1024 is a little bit squinky. So, like, if you assume 64-bit, you could even say, like, each one of these things could be 16 bits, right? And you would still be fine. So 4 tags, 16 bits per tag, still fits in a U64, and you can use that for perfect matching no matter what it is. Like, there's no possibilities that you have any issues. So that does seem pretty good to me. So maybe we just do that. And so if you think back now to the problem that I was having before and was worried about, now this just gets a lot simpler as we start to want this entity system to actually be good, and we start to think about what we're going to be doing to it to make it actually, useful. This just sucks, right? It's hard to deal with these sorts of things. You don't want to have variable length things lying around if you can avoid it, because they always lead to inefficiencies. Whatever your final implementation is. Basically, anything that is variable length is always an extra consideration when it comes time to think about performance, if you ever choose to think about performance. And so I tend to try and eliminate those things where possible, and obviously sometimes it's not possible, and that's fine. You deal with those sorts of things, or you don't. If you, like I said, don't care about the performance, then you just don't have to care because you can do whatever you want. But assuming you're actually trying to think about the efficiency of the overall thing, then when you actually look at something like this, it just looks ugly, and you're like, well, you can kind of see that this sort of wanted to be a variable length thing, and it just kind of isn't. It's just like a weird, like, we've got sort of 8 of them, I guess, or something like that. And it's just like, it still takes up way too much room and blah, 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 blah. And it's got values and a flexible count and all that stuff. So something like this is way easier. We just say, look, it's 64 bits. We fit the thing in there, and it can be a direct dispatch on that is much nicer, right? So in here, and now we don't care about that. We can put them directly in the pieces because they're relatively compact. So they can just go in here and say, look, there's a tag hash on this. And so the basic category plus the tag hash gives you what you need, right? And I don't know that we actually want so there's a decision to make here, which is, do we want the asset category and the tag hash to be welded together or not? And of course, I don't really know the answer to that question because on the one hand, it seems somewhat compelling to be able to just pass around one value. And so if you imagined, so let's say you took this, right? And you said, well, the asset category is fairly small. So if you imagine shaving a few bits off of this, you could actually fit the asset category in here basically for free, because we're not going to have 65,000 tags. Like, I couldn't even understand them all if there were that many tags. Maybe if you're Red Dead Redemption 2, you can have 65,000 tags because you have like a project manager for every tag. But like, on a game where one person's doing all the programming, that's just not going to happen, right? It doesn't even make sense because they couldn't possibly write enough interesting stuff to even use that many tags by themselves. So it would seem somewhat compelling to say, let's just float the basic category in there. And so you would then have like, okay, so there's 4 asset tags and also an asset basic category. I'm tempted to sort of say, yeah, let's do that. So in here we would do, the tags would all be shifted up slightly. So we'd say like, okay, maybe asset basic category. If we look at this thing, most of this is garbage. Like right now, it's mostly just a couple of these for the basic categories. There's, these are not really actually representative. You know what I'm saying? So if you look at how many there are, like it looks like it's pretty unlikely that there would be more than 16 of these anyway. But even if we wanted to be very safe and call it, let's say 8, that would only be 2 bits less per. So we could just do that, right? We could say, all right, there's the asset category, and that doesn't get shifted up at all. Then we OR in that needs an extra parentheses. There we go. Then we OR in everything, and these just get shifted up by that 8. So, we start out 8 up here. Then rather than adding 16, right, we just take 2 from each one to make up the difference in the 8 that we lost. So instead of adding 16, we add 14 to the 8. So this only goes up to 22 instead of to 24. And then again, we add 14 instead of 16 again. So we end up with 36. And then we add it one more time. So we were at 50. And then 14 would bring us to 64. So that's correct, right? So this tag hash would just give you the entire thing. And then when we look it up, we may not look it up as a tag hash quite in that way. Or we might, I don't know. So anyway, this tag hash would be all we would need then. So then if we went into the, if we went into the asset system where we're actually would be looking these up, or I guess I should say in the entity system where we're actually specifying what we're going to look up, instead of having the asset basic category here and have the asset category piece there, we would just have the tag hash part of things, and we would use just that for the lookup, right? And so probably that's like a primal thing that's basically saying, look, this is what we're getting. And then we have like these other pieces here that we're using. And I think that's all we really would need. And so then this becomes a lot easier to work with, because now the tags on the entity we just would get rid of. So you wouldn't actually need the tags on the entity anymore at all. Like this stuff wouldn't need to be there, right? So now if we actually do a compilation here, we can sort of take care of some of these errors. I'm also going to write down like full width compilation window. All right. So this goes behind my head. So I was saying, like, you know, having this over here would be pretty nice, right? So switching the way that this thing works back to the old way I had it would be nice. It looks like we've got a syntax error here, probably because we've got just sloppy parens, right? So let's try and fix that. So if we look at this, what's going on with that indentation? Like, that's should line up with that, right? But for some reason it doesn't. Is that like some kind of forecoder nonsense? This used to work just fine, so I don't feel like it's... Something's weird about that. Anyone know what that is? Right? I mean, that should line up properly with the parentheses, but it doesn't. Like, foo equals... Yeah, that's just weird, right? I don't know what's going on there. Let's see. Paren... Indenting... Busted? Man, my handwriting is terrible today. I'll be lucky if I can even read that. So yeah, that should be lining up properly and isn't. That's going to be really annoying, but we'll have to figure out what's going on with that later. Here's our shift stuff. You can see here that it's all lined up like so. And then we can balance our parentheses. So should be that. Oops, not that. There we go. So I think that's all good. So now if we take a look at what happens here, right, where we do get best match bitmap from, hopefully now we can just turn this into a straightforward lookup where we just hand it that 64-bit identifier, which is like the welding together of the tags and the category and such. And hopefully then it will just do what it needs to do directly. Now, the problem that we'll have, and like I said, we need to, this probably will affect the import, and we'll take a look at that next week, because I don't think we'll have time today. But when we look at the tag matching here, we don't want any of this stuff anymore, right? So what we actually want to do is we want to pass down just a simple vector of the parameters, and you can see what the parameters are already, right? We already have them defined here, and if you imagine getting rid of the weight vector, because the weight vector is not useful, right? So we imagine getting rid of the weight vector, so weight vector goes goodbye. And we take a look at how the tags are. These tags are now going to get replaced, so we don't care about these. I'm not sure what the heck this was about. So if the thing is grass, it wants to weight that more heavily, and that must have just been some hack for like getting the picking correct or whatever, right? Like, I don't even know. But anyway, we have like an entity facing direction here. And so the entity facing direction is an example of a parameter that actually needs to go into the tag matrix part of things, which again, like I said, now can just be more of a direct match kind of a thing. but we still do need that. So when we actually call the matching, we need, in addition, when we go and pass the asset hash entry stuff, right? We also do need to pass like something like a vec4 that has like the parameters for this thing that include like the facing direction and anything else that's parametric along the inside that matrix. And the thing that I don't know is to what extent we actually have anything happening in there. So we've got like, I think there's like the dodging is in there, but I don't know if we actually use it. I think we don't. So to the extent that we ever have this, it's usually like just variance is mostly what is going on with that picking, right? So it may just be facing directions, and I don't know, like if it's like the horizontal axis just is not really used for anything other than variance as far as I know. So we kind of have to like see how that progresses a little bit more. But at the very least, at the moment, we can say pretty definitively that like it just doesn't matter at all because all we've been using is that. So maybe in the future we don't, like, it's unclear that we even use those slots for anything. It looks like there's some expressions in here, so there maybe is an expression field, but like basically we're just talking about passing a few things down. So I think we can afford to do something like this, which is like our match vector or something, and just say, look, we're just going to pass down the facing direction for now, and we're not going to pass down anything else, right? So this goes away, and all this crap goes away. Goodbye. And, you know, we'll see what develops if we ever need anything else. It may be that we end up with it's not even using everything in a v4 anyway, because none of our stuff actually cares. I don't know. But what we would say is, all right, there's the assets here. We know there's a tag hash that we're getting from there. We're going to pass in a single v4 match vector. And that's it. Like, that's how we match our bitmaps now, right? So if we look at get best match bitmap, and we look at what that's actually going to use now. Oh, can we turn this thing off? No. Like, I really strongly dislike that thing. It makes it impossible for me to see my code. So while, you know, I don't mind that, like, it's helpful that it's showing this information, but it should show it, like, over here, right? Or something. Like, it should show it it should pick a location on the screen that's the least likely to be something that I would actually see. Another option would be, so, okay, here's an idea. Is Ryan here? He's probably not. Why would he be? I don't know why he's here, or if he was here, or what. But here's the proposal, Ryan. This is what I'm going to propose right now. Is Ryan on the chat? Let's see. I don't see any flurry in there. But here's my... Oh, he is here. All right, never mind. So here's the thing, Ryan. I've got an idea. So I like this thing that shows the stuff, but it's always in the way. Like, I can't see my code when it's up. Here's my new proposal. Are you ready for this? It's just like... It's just where it's at. So rather than this thing, we do a single window across the bottom like I used to have that's like only 4 lines long. This thing just shows up down there, right? So you can always look down there for this stuff. It doesn't interrupt code. When you build, when you hit next error, it will show you the build happening in that same window. So it's just like the multi-purpose crap that you need to see occasionally, but that you don't want to overwrite your stuff window. Does that seem plausible? Maybe? I don't know what else to do because basically, like, it does seem like, I mean, I'm not used to it. I would just turn it off for now because I'm not used to looking at it anyway. But it does show useful information, so if I started getting used to it, I would probably use it. But I can't handle that it overwrites what I'm looking at. So I feel like it just needs to be moved somewhere, but I don't know where. But if we took the compile window and made that be the constant, like, HUD, basically, then we could show that stuff, and it would possibly solve both problems. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure. My other idea was that you put it over on the opposite pane, so like it's across from you, but then that probably obscures something you were trying to look at as well, so I just don't know. I don't know. Anyway, I gotta make a bunch of changes and then send you my changes anyway. Maybe I'll try that and see what happens. I don't know. It might be just a bad idea. I have no idea. Yeah, we could make it be that the control key pops it up. I think there's the code peak thing. There already is a code peak thing that happens that I don't really know much about. That, right? So it like it pops up like a whole thing. There's just there's a lot of stuff in here now that's actually really cool. Like, you know, you can just hover over something like get first asset from or something and hit that. Although, so like random choice, right? And then you can hit the code peak thingy. So you can say like, which I don't have bound anything right now, but the flurry code peak thing, it'll just jump you and show you like, it'll jump you right to that thing and show you what it is in like a pop-up, which is great in theory, but just not particularly useful in practice because it's unclear how I keep editing and still make use of this information. So I feel like it's very useful, but it needs to have some way to show itself in a location that doesn't make it impossible to keep working. And that's the part that I'm not sure exactly what the right decision is. I still need to think about it. I don't know. But that's the problem. Like right now, the problem is actually design, not features. Like there's more features than fit in the like graphic design of what's going on. If that makes sense. We'll think about it. Yeah, a peak buffer that you stick into a panel is not a bad idea, but again, I just think the problem is, fundamentally speaking, it needs to be smarter about what's going on. So when you are doing like a code peak, it needs to try to get out of your way. I mean, I might almost suggest like it goes in the other pane on the opposite half of the screen from where you are. Right? Yeah, jump to definition I use a lot as well. People are talking about that. And I made a new key command actually also, which I think, didn't I? Go to code peak. I don't know if that's bound to anything though. Is it? Let's see. Quote. So I do have here, like, if I go, if I want to go to the definition of random choice, I can just hit quote, and there I am, right? So I do have the jump version of this, where I do already have that one, right? And that seems pretty good. Like, it does seem like a good feature. I have to get used to actually using it, but it seems pretty good, right? So yeah. What if you only have one pane? I don't care. I don't care at all what happens to people who only have one pane. That's their problem. If you only have one pane, then you need to do your own design work, right? I strictly do double pane editing, so I'm only really concerned about things that happen with dual pane editing. So yeah, jump history. Well, I have jump history in my normal editor that I use for day-to-day work. I don't know if 4Coder has the jump history stuff. I think it does. Anyway, doesn't matter. Point being, here's the get best match bitmap stuff. And really, this bitmap ID nonsense is just a way of making sure we keep things straight. This is going to be the same lookup for all of the different assets. We now no longer need this stuff, so we're really just talking about one of those tags. We probably should try to insulate ourselves a little bit here and say that, you know, asset tag hash, something like that. I probably should make sure that this is an actual type we've defined. And that way we know that, you know, people aren't just accidentally passing an integer, like, because they got the function order wrong or something, just to keep us a little bit more type checked. And just lean on the compiler a little bit there for that. But otherwise, we're fine. So we've got the tag hash and the match vector. Those two things would just go in here. And yeah, and off we would go. So this all should be basically the same. I guess for get first bitmap from, I don't really know that matters anymore, but we'll humor them and just say, well, you just pass zeros as the match vector, and that's, you know, you call it a day. So when you call get, also, why? Yeah, this is not really going to make much sense anymore. So really, none of this. It's not even best match. Like, none of this. This is just gonna. There's just gonna be one thing. It's gonna be called get asset from, right? So it's always gonna be now called get asset from. You're gonna pass it the assets. You're gonna pass it the tag hash and the match vector. It's gonna do this whole rigmarole. You can see, so random assets we're not using at the moment, which is fine, and we don't care about that anyway. So really, this is the match bit here, and so we need this to get superseded here. So we're gonna say get asset from. It returns the U32. I don't know that it really needs to be a time function anymore because it should be quite fast now, whereas it was quite slow before. But when we do a get asset from, we're going to look it up in the hash table. So if we now look at what this was doing, it's going to do something quite different. So we shouldn't need to do this anymore. We should be able to look up directly into the hash table. So there should just be this tag hash. We wouldn't need this first asset of type, I don't think, for anything anymore. And I don't know if I should delete it just yet. I'll just make a note. But in here, we would take the tag hash value and look it up in the hash table. So it would basically just be, hey, yeah, mod by whatever this thing is. And unfortunately, we may need this to be sort of a prime number hash. We can take a look at that, and the reason that I say that is because what we're going to get here is the problem of we wouldn't really get any mixing on these tags. We stack them in the order that we actually care about them, and that's great, but the problem is, so you can see, well, you can already see what the problem is. So in order to look this up in a relatively... Oh, well, actually, but we can just mix it first, because we actually have the power of 1,000 suns, if we want, right? Because I think we allow SSE4 or whatever, right? Don't we? What's our situation here? Don't we? I don't really know. I don't really know what we allow and what we don't allow, to be completely honest with you. At this point, I have no idea what we're actually using and what we're not. Yeah, I don't know. But if we wanted to... So we just have a to-do for this, right? So I don't know, like, I don't know why we would at this point, because we've gotten to the point where, you know, if we just take long enough to make Handmade Hero, we don't have to worry about backwards compatibility. Basically, the longer you take to make a game, the easier it gets to make a game. Which is not true at all in the mental sense, but it's definitely true in the compatibility sense. So if you look here, it's like, it's basically complete. Like, nobody on Steam can't do that. So you pretty much can just ship... I mean, you could ship AVX nowadays if you wanted to. You're talking about 7% of the user base on Steam that you would be worried about. Not so much SSE4A. Nobody really likes that. But there you go. Don't ship AVX 512, though, folks. Not great market penetration there, Intel. So, you know, we probably just can, if we want to. So what that means is if we wanted to, we could just do, you know, some hardcore hashing here, right? So if we have one of these tag hashes, maybe we just actually do something fancy here, you know, like we want to produce a 32-bit lookup from like some 64-bit values or whatever. I don't know, right? So we want to call some kind of hash or something. Maybe I'll call it hash 32 because it produces 32. You pass it two of these or something, and we just want to produce a perfectly distributed number from that. So we don't want to have to use prime number slots and weird divides and crap like that, and still get kind of questionable results. So maybe we'll just have a hash here, and what we'll do is we'll pass in the tag hash value thing. So we'll just say, okay, the tag hash value, we do a hash 32 of that, and then we mod off, which would just, you know, do a truncate, and that gives us our hash slot, right? And to do this, we can just do some AES rounds. So basically, like AES rounds, you know, they're specifically made for doing encryption, right? So they are specifically made to scramble the bits of a sequence in ways that are exactly what we would want for a hash table, because they're very unpredictable, and so they should take all the bits and scramble them. A single round of AES only gets you byte to 32. So it goes, each bit goes out to 32 bits worth of variance, right? And so we need to run 2 rounds to make sure that we propagate our bits forward enough, but that's all we should really need to do to get a pretty perfect hash out of it, I would think. So if we just said, okay, you know, if we just run a few rounds of this, so we basically say like, okay, the hash value is going to be an MMAS deck of whatever the value is starting with. So we would just need something where we can load 2 of these. I don't actually know what the most efficient intrinsic is to tell it to take 2 64 bits, because there isn't really such a thing. So you kind of need to load into each side, and OR is probably what you would do. But let me just check what the intrinsics are for this sort of thing these days. So assuming that we're doing something like this. That's actually loading from, so do I want to call this a convert? What is your terminology here, Mr. Intel? All right, so this is probably what would tell the compiler what we want for the most part. So like set EPIX 48x, right? That's what we're trying to do. So I think that would tell the compiler as best as possible, like we're trying to put these things into a, into a single register. So I'm gonna try this and hope that tells the compiler well enough what I'm trying to do, right? So here, there you go. We don't care about the order. It doesn't matter because we're hashing them. So as long as they both go in there, it's fine. So then we would just need basically like a seed here. So I'm gonna make sure that the seed is loaded up in there. And I'll just hash this twice, and then we'll call it a day. So the result of the hash, we would then need to do an convert so that we can pull out the, I don't remember the syntax they use for these, but we basically need to do a convert out to a register. This Intel syntax always drives me nuts because I never remember. So not that. Not that either. Oh, for the love of God. Just extract the thing. Okay. It's this. So it's convert SI 128. So the SI 128 goes on the inside. So it would be Well, actually, you know what? It's probably an extract, technically, though, right? Yeah. So we only need 32 out of it, and we just need the 0th one. So presumably that's the right one to do. I don't know. I mean, arguably, you maybe just if you only want the bottom one, they might have had a better one. So I could see asking for an EPI 32 here just to make sure that I'm not totally wrong about that. So those all still seem like the same level, so I'm not sure that it really helps, but just looking. Because that's the one that would do what we want, right? I mean, it looks like that's the only one. So I'm just going to say that that's maybe what we want. So it's extract EPI, So extract EPI 32. And a immediate. So it would just be hash 0. So that would give us a pretty nice hash, right? And it takes probably like that would be something like 8 cycles to get a really nice hash, which seems fine. I mean, even if we just think about like what the divide would have cost us just to get the prime part of it, right? A div on an integer is pretty bad, right? It's not really what we want to be doing. So if we do a div, or I should say a mod, let's see here. I mean, it's just bad, right? It's just bad. So 8 cycles for a perfectly distributed hash is very good, because even just the divide alone would cost us probably almost that much. So I would say we just stick with this, and go from there. So we'd load the hash slot this way, and yeah, the seed value, we just need some random seed that we can use. So it would, it's just garbage. It doesn't matter. In fact, I can just put it in here. So there's just some seed value that's 16 bytes long. That is what we would hash with. And, for the sake of being a good random user, can I just get some randomness in here? So sequences, maybe, or raw bytes. I would like hexadecimal bytes, 16, please. Look at these delicious random bytes. All right, so there's my seed value, which is just a mixing value, because AES deck XORs, it's going to XOR. We don't really care about that XOR at all, because we don't really need it to do that. So we could just XOR it. We could probably just XOR it with 0 if we wanted. If we wanted to, would be fine. But for the sake of, since we're gonna seed anyway, we might as well just do a memop and point it there. It's basically free for these purposes. So, it should be fine. All right, so, whoa, I don't know what's going on here. Something's unhappy. Oh, just the commas. All right, so we can just pass 0 for the second one, and actually I'll probably make that a default parameter so that people don't have to care, so that it's clear that they don't need it. So we'll just do that. And then this part here where we've got the tag hash assets by tag is probably a better name for that. And I'm supposed to stop programming now, I think, because we are out of time, right? But that's what we would be doing. This, after we look it up, none of this is now necessary, except for one thing, which is the match vector needs to be able to generate an index based on the actual, so you can see it like looping through the tags of the particular asset, right? And we don't actually want that. What we want to be able to do is basically use a lookup that goes directly to the index in question based on the type of thing that this particular file type, whatever that is, uses. So facing direction is the only thing we have right now, and may be the only thing we ever have. But there was something in a file like that had expression. So facing direction going down and variant going across seems like the sort of thing we would need to know. There's also particle files which have variant going across and down. So we need something here that produces like that coordinate, if you will. Like the thing that basically says like, here's the lookup here's the way we would look up that 2D grid. And so that's really the only other thing we would be doing. And the way we need to do that is to look at which kind of asset it actually is and make sure that the match vector pulls out the correct two pieces for the X and the Y. So it would be something like this, right? Like X index, Y index, right? And it would be like, you know, match vector. And in both cases, we would have pulled, so the tag hash value, we would pull the asset basic category out of the tag hash, which is trivial because it's just the bottom 8 bits, right? So at any time, we can just say that the asset basic category just kind of comes out. So like get category from tag hash. By the way, this should obviously produce one of these things. Like so. What is going on with that indentation? Someone tell me right now. I do not understand. So the asset tag hash produces this. It can then undo that, right? By just saying the bottom 8 bits produce the category, right? So these are pretty straightforward. So once we have the basic category, we would just need to know these two pieces of information. And then we would need to know how to actually expand the value and round it. So all of this code that was really bad and dangerous, right, would presumably go away, and then we would have that lookup pretty straightforward. The problem... Oh. So, okay. Actually, we might as well just also match on that. So if you think about it, once you know which of these you're going to do, you can roll them into the hash, which would also make a ton of sense. And hey, guess what? We have the extra room to do that because in addition to that base tag hash value, we could also just say, well, we have the coordinate value, right? That comes in here as another U64, which is just the two coordinates packed together, right? So if you imagine producing here from the match vector with like the facing direction, all that crap, right? We should be able to do that. Now, there are some difficulties here. You can see that we kind of have this problem where for matching things like the facing direction, it kind of does need to be like futzed with a little bit. And honestly, that kind of seems like something that should probably be back in the other... that should probably be in the code that happens before we pass it down. So I'm going to leave it to do... We should stop. I'm overtime to do. You know, move... Let's try to remind ourselves of what we're doing here. So move coordinates into hash. Move... sort of preparation of facing direction out into the calling code so it prepares the match vector properly. And maybe match vector is actually called something else and is just an integer set or something. I think probably, like, it probably should just be an integer set. Like, it probably should just be this. So there's an asset tag hash, right? And then there's a separate thing you have, which is an asset, like, chord hash, right? And that's a separate way of packing in what those coordinates are, right? I don't know if we want to define it that way, but we would then have a thing called an asset match vector, and that would actually just be a series of parameters. So it's effectively like however many of those we have, like facing direction, whatever, you would pass those down like as the match vector. It's not actually floats anymore because it's assumed the person who's calling in has already prepped each of the ones based on the type of thing that they are. So facing direction gets bucketed into the 4 facing directions and so on. And so then here, before we actually go to do the lookup, what we would do is say, okay, the indexes here, we pull out of the basic asset category, depending on which category it is. We would say, all right, for the assets, there's like a layout, you know, like a category layout. We pull the category layout for whatever this category is, and then we know that for each of these things we have which ones we use. So once we get the layout, we would then know that, oh, okay, we pick the X element and the Y element, right? So out of the match vector, which we could have as many of these as we want, that's getting fed forward by the entity system, it's like, look, here's the parameters we have. We just say, look, for this particular type of asset, like if it's a head or a body or a particle, what's the layout? Like, how do we actually produce those things, right? And then it pulls them out. You know what I'm saying? So once it has those, then it would just say, all right, weld those together. In fact, we don't even really need to do this. We could just say, look, weld them together directly. Well, you know, we'll do it. Why not? So then we would just say the coordinate lookup is just the X index ORed with the Y index, right? So then you just hash these in the whole thing. And off you go. So that looks really nice because now all of this crap goes away, right? Like this is all gone. And so now it's a very straightforward process to actually get this thing. So you hash it, you run through the slot, you find it, if you found the match, good for you. Congratulations, you're a huge hero. If you didn't, you just return 0, right? So we would just run through the hash slot here, and we would just look for matches that now which ones exactly match this, and then we would return it, right? So that would be like way faster than this garbage. I mean, this was terrible, right? I mean, computers are so fast these days that we weren't really struggling, even though this code is complete garbage, because it's just amazing. Like, I don't know how people manage to make things as slow as they do. When I look at some of the things that I make that are running at still like 60 frames a second, and you're just like, this is complete garbage code. I don't know how you manage to make it so garbage that it's like web browser slow, but they do somehow. So I don't know. So we'll stop here and then we'll move on. We'll stop here for now, and we'll move on next week to finishing that. Okay. Questions from people. Just put 4 VMs in front of the code. Well, it's not just 4 VMs, right? It's like also just like straight up interpreters. Like a lot of people use like PHP or Python or stuff that's not even like compiled to bytecode. Off topic, feel free to ignore, but someone told me that on PlayStation, games run in a sandbox, and if you forget to free any memory you allocated when you exit, that sandbox will be kept alive in the background. I guess I don't know. I'm not really a PlayStation expert. My recollection on like the PlayStation 4 was that it's just got a memmap primitive. So, I mean, you wouldn't be allocating memory per se in the same way that you're talking about it there. Like, there's no forget to free, quote unquote. Like, you would have to have the base layer that does the mem mapping remember to mem unmap stuff at map, but you wouldn't be doing an mmap per alloc anyway. So you've already got a system at the bottom, and it would be trivial for that system to just chain its mmaps together. So even if you were worried about something like that, you could just keep a list of, the 30 mmaps you actually did or something, and when you want to exit the program, just unmemmap them. You wouldn't have to worry about actually freeing, per se, individual allocations because you aren't doing individual allocations through mmap, right? Or if you are, heaven help you, you've got other problems. But I don't know. I'm not really a PlayStation person, and I don't have, like you said, it may have something that, like, I may not be able to talk about more specifically without an NDA breaking thing anyway. But the real answer is I just don't remember and or know, because I don't do a lot of PlayStation programming. So it's less about NDA and more about just like that's not something I'm super familiar with. Like I've programmed the PS2 and 4, never the 3. And I didn't really program the 2. Like I sort of just ported some stuff to the 2, but I didn't really like seriously do fancy stuff on it. I'd like to hear a discussion between me and John about metaprogramming philosophy, and students asked what he thought Drive was satisfied in terms of metaprogramming. He said the way you think about metaprogramming is really different from the way he thinks of it. He thinks I'm wrong about it. Yeah, I mean, John and I don't think about programming similarly at all, is probably a better way to say it. And so it wouldn't really even just be like metaprogramming that we think about differently. It's also one of the reasons that I can't say for sure that I would end up switching to JAI, because my guess is that the way that it probably works is not really the way that I think about things anyway. So I don't know, but I don't think there's a wrong or a right there. I don't know. If John thinks I'm wrong about metaprogramming, that's a little weird because I don't know. He doesn't do a whole lot of metaprogramming, so I don't know what the chances are that I'm like wrong, but I definitely think there's probably multiple ways of trying to conceptualize that, and you have to sort of decide it's you can't have it all one way or the other, so there's probably not a universal right answer, right? So, but if John thinks there is, then, he thinks there is. But I couldn't say about that, right? I like the fact that JI takes metaprogramming seriously. It's got a lot better features than most things, but it's not the way that I would do it, right? Because So the way that John thinks about metaprogramming, as far as I can tell, is that the language is still mostly not about metaprogramming in the sense that it's still very defined in terms of that the language is this thing that you've specified a bunch of policy for. And then metaprogramming is just a thing that lets you mutate the AST when you start, right? And that's still way better than most programming languages, which don't really let you do that very much. They're really clunky. Like JI seems to let you do metaprogramming in a more like as a more serious operation that's not busted, right? But I still think like metaprogramming is actually about full chain flexibility, like the ability to write out an executable should be something that's written into the meta program to me, right? That's the way I would do it. And the reason is just because I so often encounter all of these things that I need to be able to do, and I can't do them because the compiler just does them in one particular way, and you can't actually do anything about it, right? So many questions that are totally random. I have no idea. Why are new compression techniques such as Microsoft Direct Storage, PS5 compression needed for instant loading? Why are NVMe speeds not enough? What's the bottleneck? Well, so alright. If you take a look, I mean, let's try to get a value here, right? Where's my speed crunch? So, you know, I don't know. I just randomly ask Google because I don't know exactly what the current rate for read-write speeds on these things are. But, you know, 32 giga... is that gigabytes per second? Yes. If it's 32 gigabytes per second is the NVMe speed, I don't know what the speed is of a drive that can be placed in the PlayStation, because that may be much more expensive, right, as well. So let's take a look. Let me see. PS5 SSD speed. So it's 5.5 gigabytes per second. So the first thing to understand right there is if we're looking at those two numbers, let's assume they're accurate for now, because I don't remember these numbers at all, but let's say they're accurate. Then you're talking about like at least, you know, something like there's a 6x drop in NVMe speed in terms of what you're actually going to get from your PlayStation, because it, you know, it's not a $2,000 piece of hardware. It's like a, what, I don't know what they cost, $600, $400. So the SSD that's in the PlayStation is not going to be like the ultimate data center SSD or something. It's got to be like cost effective enough, right? So you're instantly down to 5.5 gigabytes per second. If you think about 5.5 gigabytes per second, right? So 5.5 gigabytes per second. And then we say like, well, how much memory does the PS5 have, right? Where is that's not memory. Can we get memory, please? Is it 16? Okay. Everyone wants me to accept their cookies. What if I don't want to accept the cookies? So 16 gigabytes, right? So if you assume 5.5 gigabytes a second peak throughput and you take 16 gigabytes of memory and you say how long does it take me to load a game to load in the full memory of the game, well, it's 3 seconds, right? Even if nothing else had to happen, it's 3 seconds. So if you want instant loading and you've got 16 megabytes of memory and you know your drive can only produce 5.5 gigabytes per second peak throughput, then if you want instant loading, you are a factor of 3 at least away, and that's if you accept the second loading. What if you want it to be like a fraction of a second? Right? So when you look at this, you're like, if we can boost this by getting, let's say, 2-to-1 compression out of it or something, it starts to look a lot better. 1.5 seconds is a lot better than 3 seconds, right? So if in practice you're getting 5.5 peak and you know you've got 16 to fill, hopefully that gives you an idea of why this isn't a solved problem, right? So NVMe bandwidth is 32 gigabytes max. At that rate, it would take half a second to fill the memory. So even if you imagined a theoretically maximal NVMe drive, which, like I just said, they can't afford anyway, because that would be some heinous, gigantic array of chips with extremely massive heat dissipation or something, right? So this is why it's not a solved problem just to say, well, we don't need compression because we can just load the thing, right? And so it makes perfect sense why they would want to invest in really good compression technology and try to do chip-assisted decompression and stuff, because it's simply not a solved problem if you're trying to get down to instant, right? If you just want relatively short loading screens, that's probably fine. 3 seconds, I don't like that kind of delay, but that's probably something gamers would tolerate. But if you're trying to get to instant, to like, this is really instant, it's not a solved problem to just say, well, the SSDs are fast enough, because they're not, right? So does that answer the question? I don't know. I don't know what all the questions are here. Way too many topics. Is that you, Roman? I moved to the east side. I just moved out of Seattle. I'm still in the like greater Washington area, but I don't live in the city. If I go from SSD to NVMe, speeds are not improved. Well, okay, but so just to be clear, SSD and NVMe are not different things, right? So SSD is just solid state drive. It just means that the thing is a memory based architecture, like, right? Like, not a spinning platter. NVMe is a bus specification. So NVMe is just saying this is how the thing will communicate, and so are you meaning to say if you go from SATA to NVMe is what you mean, or something? Like I'm not, SSD and NVMe are not things you go from or to. Like an NVMe drive is an SSD drive, right? It's a solid state drive. Yeah. So NVMe is just a protocol difference designed to allow for higher bandwidth, but if the SSD isn't itself particularly much better, then the speed doesn't get particularly better, right? So NVMe enables much faster speeds, but the actual drive you buy may top out well before that, and therefore you wouldn't see, some drives wouldn't even saturate your whatever the thing is you were switching from, right? And so yeah. All right, there's just too many questions. I'm going to wrap it up for today. Let's close this down. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you, as always. If you would like to follow the series at home, you could always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with the source code. Also, I saw a lot of people in the chat asking about Star Code Galaxy and when it's going to be available. I'm hoping it will be available soon. I am working pretty hard to try and get it out. In short order, if you want to be notified when it is available, you can just put your name in here, go to the Star Code Galaxy website, and put your address in here and hit subscribe, and then it will tell you when it is available. That's it for today. I'll be back here next week, and at that point, I'll go ahead and implement the tag system that we just talked about today and basically did the first half of. Cleaning that up, I think, will be pretty great, and it'll just let us really quickly match what assets we want in which places, which was kind of really onerous and annoying right now. So pretty soon we should be able to get that straightened out. And then I'll probably just do some stuff where I just try to add a bunch of stuff to the game, and we should be able to see like what's annoying pretty early on, right? Like we should be able to get a good feel at that point for what stuff is still kind of annoying to work with. And so that's what I'll probably be focusing on. All right, that's it for today. See you back here next weekend. Until then, have fun programming. I'll see you all on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.